Here we go with some basic skull anatomy. I'm going to go over some of the bones and then some of the special features for them. So I'm just going to start with the basic bones. So frontal bone in the front of the skull. So this whole area would be considered frontal bone. As you move to the side, you have your parietal bone. Now this is a paired bone, so you have a right and a left parietal. As it extends to the posterior, by the way, you can see the shape of the skull. It is narrow in the front and it widens towards the back. As we move to the back, we have our occiput right there. And drop down a little bit, sorry. So there's our occipital bone, our occiput bone. All right, and then as we move back to the side, down by where the ear canal is, so our external acoustical meatus is right there. All right, so just above that, this bone right here is your temporal bone. So you have parietal on top, and then you have the temporal just below it. And there are a lot of landmarks on each of these, which we'll go over in a minute. But let's talk about some of the features here. So the first one is going to be the coronal suture. So the coronal suture runs across the top of the skull, right there. I don't know why you guys, sorry about that. I'm actually going to make my camera a little bit bigger so you guys can see that a little better. Sorry. Hopefully that'll help. So coronal suture, okay? It runs between the frontal bone and the two parietal bones. So there's our coronal suture. Our sagittal suture follows the sagittal plane and runs, ignore the hole, by the way, that doesn't happen. It runs in between our two parietal bones, okay? The lambdoid suture runs between the occiput and the two parietal bones, okay? The nasion, that's where the frontal bone right here meets the nasal bone. So that little articulation right in there, that's the nasion coming across the front. That's the nasion. The bregma, that's the point where our coronal suture meets our sagittal suture. That point right there. Okay? The lambda is where the sagittal suture meets the lambdoidal suture. So back there, that little intersection right there. That's the lambda. The pterion is where the frontal bone, the sphenoid, which we haven't talked about, the temporal bone, and the parietal bone all meet. That little area right there, okay? The middle meningeal artery is in this region, pterion. And then you have the asterion, which is where the temporal, parietal, and occiput bone all meet. So back here, that's the asterion. So those are just some of the basic bones of the skull. They each have individual landmarks, but that was just a brief one, and I'll go into a little bit more in depth later.